General Lidder, thanks so much for joining us on SNI again. So the AFINDEX, the exercises between Africa, 17 nations and India. Now we have bilateral exercises of various kinds with the countries. We have multilateral. We took part in the SCO as well, which had 6 countries. But this is probably the largest in terms of countries involved.
Yes, admittedly. I think this is the biggest outreach to Africa as far as I can think. And 17 countries, and that too from the complete African continent. Very happy to see the list. Southern Africa, complete. Northern Africa, Egypt, Sudan, where we're trying to build up interests and we have strategic interests also, as well as a whole mosaic in Western Africa. Big countries like Nigeria and even small countries like Benin. So I think it's a very good sign, and I'm very glad that we have now been able to reach out to Africa in an area where we're truly strong. You know, this is an area they look forward to us in our training, especially towards UN peacekeeping, peace operations it is called now, as well as a host of other activities that we could progress from here. So it's a very good sign.
General, why is it important to engage Africa on this level militarily in terms of the larger picture?
Well, I think we all know that in the developing interests, Africa is the future continent. And we have a lot of economic interests. I was in Sudan, we have oil interests. We have traditionally had interests, relations with Eastern Africa complete. You visit the Eastern African coast, right from South Africa, right up to Ethiopia, Eritrea, you will find a sizable Indian population. Trade has been going across the Indian Ocean traditionally, and a very visible Indian footprint is available in the eastern coast. Even now, when I recently went to Senegal, I was very happy to see that even in Western Africa, our tradesmen, etc., have started reaching, and even people are getting out of that old French mode and trying to get Indian entrepreneurs, even for infrastructure development. So there is a huge scope in Africa. And since quite a lot of African countries have military background, I think military cooperation becomes a very important adjunct in this relationship. And I'm very happy we are following that.
General Lidder is saying that Africa is the next continent that everybody is looking at, and we're seeing a beeline of some sort being made by various other countries. How does India place in terms of a strategic role in Africa in comparison to other countries?
Well, let me tell you, the main competitor is basically China. China is also making a big effort to run. As far as the military is concerned, we have distinct 3-4 advantages, I can tell you, vis-a-vis China. One is the multicultural background that all of us as Indians enjoy, especially in the military. We've learned how to cooperate. So multiculturalism comes very, very naturally to us. Number 2 is the language. Now, admittedly, the language being used is either English, which we are very good, or some countries are French. But we've overcome those problems. I mean, in the training, etc., we are having French interpreters and we are reaching out. So that's not much of a thing. I think the huge thing what the African countries are looking for is the experience we have in what is now developing as the hybrid peacekeeping operations. You see, with the counterterrorism, non-state armed groups coming in, the UN peace operations are going a distinct change. And this sort of on-the-ground experience with our Northeast and Kashmir, etc., we have, and they look forward to our, indulging in them. And the last thing I would say is technology, which can be absorbed by them. You know, there's a distinct difference in level of technology when you go to the West. But India is in a position to provide them technology which can be absorbed, which is understood, because in a stepping stone, that helps. So I think these are some of the distinct advantages we can offer. And the African nations are fully aware of it, and they look forward to India coming up and supporting them in this method.
When you're talking about military exercises like this, again, in the larger picture, how important is the tradition that we have of training officers and troops from the African countries?
Yeah. You see, traditionally, we have been having training academies in Africa. Long time back, I remember we had in Nigeria. That was in the 60s. Thereafter, we had in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana. And presently, we have 2 only, Uganda and Tanzania. But I do hope other countries also come forward. So that's one issue. that we put training academies, we have training teams, train them there. The number two is the exchange of officers on training activities. We are running now African partnership courses in the Center of Peacekeeping Studies, where I also went to support them. And that has been very well received. Of course, the question always comes of finances. And I think we have to understand the MEA has to make finances available. It's pittance, really, if you ask me. But the payoffs are much, much more in this. I was very happy to see that we have also started sending senior officers for training in Africa. The International Peace Sport Training Center in Nairobi, where I mentor the regional senior mission leadership course. The last 3 courses I've been finding an Indian full colonel there, and that's a very healthy sign. So I do hope we can contribute, that we have to get out of this old mindset of sending our officers only to Europe and Western countries. It's, I think, time for us to pay back and give our people to these African countries where they can contribute much more than even in the West.
That is going to be my next question. You talked about India's contribution, whether it's a peacekeeping, anti-terror technology that we can contribute to the African countries. What can we learn from them, and should these kind of multilateral exercises be held, say, in Africa too?
See, the main face of Africa today, the peacekeeping is going to be increasingly African countries, local stakeholders. And when the UN has find itself stretched, is looking for regional partnerships. And regional partnership, the biggest player is African Union. And within African Union, there are a whole lot of countries like ECOWAS in the West, IGAD in East Africa. So the regional players are going to play much more bigger role in peacekeeping. So that means, really speaking, boots on the ground increasingly come to Africa. Let me tell you, there's a distinct advantage in them. There is also a flip side. Flip side, of course, is that whenever you deploy regional forces, they bring in along with them political baggage, which, can be counterproductive. But the good side is that they are the people who belong to that culture. They understand. So the grassroots level, when you come to about cultural competence, about, operating techniques, especially living in those harsh areas, the Africans are there in front of you. And so they are not afraid in taking risks. So they are there, So I do feel these areas can come, and why not? I definitely feel we can send our contingents. We've been sending it to the Americans and elsewhere, and why not? Even Mongolia, etc. I think it is time. Now 17 of them sent. In future, the node can be different. Africa's got beautiful training centers. The Cairo International Training Center is there. The STSAC in Nairobi. Ghana, there's Kofi Annan Support Center in Accra. And South Africa International Security Institute, whole host of them. And they could act as a hub, and we could send our troops there. And I think this sort of exercise truly builds up the relationships of defense in a much more coherent manner than just these various, seminars or various visits. Because people learn to live together, operate together, and it really makes you understand the groundswell and the granularity is much clearer.
And if the exercises like this, more importantly, training of African, both officers and troops, that in the long run could benefit India when those people get to much higher positions.
Admittedly, you see, this is all part of networking. And we've had traditionally, I remember in the National Defense Academy, we used to have a whole lot of African cadets coming those days. And some of them held very senior appointments after that. It's somehow reduced over the years. I'm not too sure what is the thing now. But still, I know Africans come hell of a lot. You'd be surprised that whenever I had African contingents, whenever I went to them, and a lot of the cultural habits are the same, they'll start speaking in Hindi. They have Bollywood song. They'll say, "Garam roti laos, force commander ke liye." So, they've all been trained here. And invariably somebody will walk across. He's a technical guy, done CME Pune, or he's done, in the infantry school, etc. And these are all building blocks. After all, when you operate together and then you rise up in service, there is a better understanding of each other. So why not?
I've experienced that firsthand. Now, you talked about technology and how it's easier for the Africans to absorb the technology that we have in the military. There was an exhibition of sorts after the exercises where equipment from the DRDO, from the private sector, from startups were also exhibited. Is there a considerable market for Indian technology or weaponry of any sorts in Africa?
I am very sure there is. Even in Sudan, when I was there, we are there. The only thing is, again and again, we caution, we have to get over our bureaucracy. You know, by the time people approach us, this has been the same sad story. We get into the cycle of our clearances and things like that. By that time, people lose patience. So somehow, we've got to cut over the bureaucracy. We tell you, there is market there, and people are wanting it and there. So we've got to reach out, because in the time of need, everybody is looking for various vendors, and whoever can give the best and in the shortest feasible time. We've lost out, I'm afraid. I'm sorry to say, this is the sad story in the Indian part, and I hope we can overcome this and iron out these faults.
General Lidder, it was a pleasure as usual talking to you, sir, on SNI.
Thank you very much.